What's good, football fans? Back at you once again with another video. And as I always say, it feels good to be able to come out on Monday and talk about what the team did to get a victory. And it does feel good to say the team has now won 9 games for the first time since 2015. Mainly that's because the last few years have been tough. You know, last season I felt like they underachieved. There's no way in my mind I ever thought they would have came out and only won 4 or 5 games, ever. But it's mind-numbing to think that we're at a spot where this is the first back-to-back victories in the month of December since 2020. And during that time, the team was 2-9-1, which was good enough for 4th worst in the NFL in the month of December. I mean, there's no other way to put it, but that's ridiculous. Now, before I get into this game, I definitely want to state that I am unbelievably happy the team was able to pull the win off. You know, after the last few years that we've had, it's great just to see them win, period. That said, there's no way that this game should have been as close as it was. For the life of me, I don't know how you could squander a first half like they had. Jayden Daniels was 17-19, 141 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the first half. One of those touchdowns was an unbelievable play. Not to mention the fact that they've now scored in the first quarter of the game for 13 straight games, which is a team record. I can remember a time in the not-so-distant past where first quarter scoring what? First half scoring what? But listen, this is a game that had no business coming down to the wire. The overall time of possession should tell the story, but it doesn't. Washington held the ball for 40 minutes and 50 seconds, while New Orleans only had it for 19 minutes and 10 seconds. That's nuts. You know, this game ended up being a game of injuries and what the hells, okay? First of all, Tyler Biadasz gets an odd illness scratch before the game. So you start the game off without your veteran center. Zach Ertz makes one hell of a catch during the game. Ends up bouncing his head off of the ground, gets a concussion. Once again, our kicker gets the pregame scratch after practicing at least one day during the week. Then Jeremy Chin goes down on the Derek Forrest hit on Valdez-Scantling. Crazy part about that play was, I don't know if he got hit with a forearm or what he got hit with, but I mean, you could instantly see that he was out. Then De'Ami Brown got hurt. I believe De'Ami came back in, but I mean, it was just a bad day for injuries. You know, Washington won the battle on third downs. You know, they were 9 for 17 for the game and held New Orleans to 3 for 11. But there were times, there was a couple of times when they should have gotten the third down. A couple other times it kind of stung a little. But I think the big thing in this one was the penalties. 9 penalties for 84 yards. And speaking of penalties, there was just some fuckfoolery going on. I mean, could have been something going on there. I don't know. There's just a bunch of crazy shit that was happening in this game that I'm going to definitely jump into. One thing that should be pointed out, and everybody should be paying attention to this, Benjamin St-Juste played in just 3 snaps in the whole game and got a penalty on one of them. I don't care how good the defense is doing. I don't see that guy coming back next year to play any role. But I do feel like this was a game filled with missed opportunity after missed opportunity after missed opportunity. Even with the start to the game that they had, with the lackluster whatever that was in the middle of the game, there were still tons of opportunities. You know, you had those 2 plays with long balls to McLaurin. The ball went off his fingertips on both of them. If either one of those balls are caught, well, the second one for sure would have been a touchdown, no problem at all. He had the whole entire defense was beaten. The first one would have set them up for another touchdown. And then, of course, we get to the deep ball to Terry McLaurin that was underthrown, where there was clearly pass interference. No flag was thrown. It was after the 2 passes that were off of McLaurin's fingertips. But on the broadcast replay, you could clearly see the Saints defender run into Terry the moment that he slowed down a little bit to catch the ball, and he makes contact before the ball ever gets there. No flag was thrown. And don't get me wrong, I'm not some guy that comes on here and constantly searches, you know, for bad calls because I know that the entire league is filled with them every week. But this game right here was an over-the-top, really, really badly called game. Especially that little chunk in between the end or the middle of the third quarter all the way to the end of the game. You know, late in the game, Washington was driving down the field and had that long play down the field negated because they called Nick Allegretti for holding. Now, I know this won't be the first time you've heard this, but there's literally holding on every play. So the referees decided that they would throw a flag on this play that would have gotten Washington down inside the 10-yard line and would have more than likely sealed the game. And that would have got them close enough where anybody could have kicked the ball through the field goal post. But instead, they ended up having to attempt that 54-yarder or whatever it was. But yeah, it was a low snap, but still, he should have hit that probably. And I've heard some people second-guessing Quinn about, going for 3 there after you had a kicker that you're not really sure about. That's an argument that always depends on which side you're sitting on. It could go either way in conversation. But this officiating team was all over the place, man. At the end of the game there wasn't the only time that I questioned them either. Earlier in the game, on the Saints' first touchdown, Alvin Kamara did not get his 2 feet in. He did not. If you watch the replay from the broadcast replay, you'll see he catches the ball with one hand, and there is clearly air in between his hand and the ball as his first foot comes down. So the ball is not pulled in yet. It's not a catch yet. But then the other foot starts to come down. So the other foot counts as the first foot at that point, okay? Because after he sucks the ball in, his right foot comes down. That's 1 foot. His left foot literally came down out of bounds. Frankie Louvu was standing there screaming it. You could even hear Jonathan Vilma say, "Ooh, I don't know about that one." And then after that, you had Dante Fowler get hit with not 1, but 2 personal fouls for roughing the passer. Now, on the first one, they called him, I guess, for hitting the mask or hitting the neck. I literally saw 2 fingers, his thumb and his forefinger, touch the side of the guy's helmet. That's all that touched, right? So they flagged him for that. That gave them 15 yards and made it 1st and 10 and led to a 41-yard field goal in the midst of that comeback. The second roughing the passer penalty on Fowler was like, what in the hell just happened? Because it was a continuation of the play. He didn't hit him anywhere near the head or the neck and literally pulled up as Rattler hit the ground. I was lost on that one. I tried to look at it from both sides of the story. I tried to look at it from the Saints side and, Washington side, and I couldn't see it. Like, that was not a penalty. And then, of course, you had the little fiasco at the end of the game where they're driving down the field and you watch the clock stop at 9 seconds. I've seen tons of people on the internet trying to say, oh, it only stopped for 2.6 seconds. Bullshit. I sat right there and counted 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, and I got about a quarter of the way through before that clock started again. So that's 4 1/4 thousand. The clock was set to 3 seconds before New Orleans was able to stop at the goal line and score. So that was complete crap. That whole situation should have never happened. To make it even worse, they asked Hochuli, that's Ed Hochuli's son, after the game about why that wasn't reviewed or looked at, and he tried to say it wasn't reviewable. Now, I've seen a whole bunch of people trying to scalp through the rule book and say that it actually is reviewable. I, for one, am not certain, so I'm not going to say either way, but I think it's pretty clear what my eyes saw. But moot point, because Washington still got the victory, But, going back and looking at the replay of the game earlier today, I can definitely see that there were some non-calls. Trust Way got ran into by at least 2 different people on the punt of about 8 minutes left in the game. No penalty. Actually, there was a penalty, but it was on the return team for blocking the back or something like that. No penalty on Way getting run into. One thing that I didn't like Washington had to do either, at about the 5:40 mark in the game, they went for it on 4th down at their own 45. Now, I realize that this team has had some really good success on 4th down. But at that point in the game, you're up. It's still a substantial amount of time left on the clock. Is it really the right time to go for it on fourth down? Do you really need to go for it on fourth down at the 45? If you don't get that, they get the ball back with 5 minutes and 35 seconds, whatever, 30 seconds, beyond midfield, down by a touchdown. Now, thankfully, obviously, Daniels, went on to be brilliant on that drive. That particular play right there, he freaking jumps over the line to get the first down, right? And then turns around and throws a bullet pass and does a couple other things unbelievably great before the penalty, halts him and makes him try that field goal that they missed. So the kid was still brilliant. And the end of the day, 25 for 31, 226 yards. He was sacked 8 times, which to me is a tad bit disturbing on a couple of different levels. Now, one of the sacks that he took, he was running out of bounds, and he ended up running, I don't know if it was directionally wrong or whatever the hell it was. He ended up running out of bounds and didn't really get sacked, but the guy got credit for a sack for running him out of bounds. So one of them is crap. Another one of them, though, he took because I don't really think that he took the defensive lineman coming at him, for serious. Like, he didn't give him enough time to be able to get out of the way of the guy, because you could tell it was a bad reaction time kind of thing. A couple of them I'm going to have to give New Orleans credit. They do have a couple of decent pass rushers on that line. I was actually kind of surprised that team didn't do a little better this year defensively. They started out the year, with their ears pinned back and looking decent. But I have to say that I'm getting more and more concerned each week about the conservative play calling in the second half. Seems like the team tails off towards the second half each game. Now, obviously, there's been a couple exceptions, and not every game is the same. You can't can them in and say, oh, this is what you get each week, because you really don't get the same thing. And the defense is obviously a progress in motion. Not only are they dealing with a bunch of players in new places this year, they're also dealing with a new coaching staff. So everybody's got to get, on the same page. It's nice to see that page is to not include St. Juice now that Marshawn Lattimore has hit the starting lineup, which, by the way, Lattimore was not targeted a single time against the Saints. I think it's safe to say New Orleans knows what kind of player he is, and they decided to stay away from him. But coming into the game, I had a few things that I was hoping to see, a few keys to the game, if you would. I wasn't sure if Alvin Kamara would play, which he did. But I believe he went out in the third quarter. But I definitely thought that they needed to get into Jake Hayner's face early, which they did. It was his first professional start, and they made him feel uncomfortable. Enough to where the Saints had to turn to Rattler in the second half. But the big key to the game in this one for me was trying to avoid the trap game, which they almost fell victim to there at the end. I don't know, when it comes down to it, it just feels like this team has a hard time putting other teams away. To be up 3 scores and have a team like the Saints that have been struggling, who have tons of injuries, come back for whatever reason, it says something to your coaching staff. They definitely are sitting around with conversation today. While maybe there's a couple plays that you might send into the league to have them take a look at, you also can't get in a situation where you blame the refs either. For a young team with a first-year coaching staff, you just take the victory and you move on to the next one, which is going to be a tough division game with a team that, is on a roll right now. And it remains a must-win situation for Washington. That's not going to change rolling from week to week from this point out. Now, one thing I want to point out, I know the team is hurting right now without Austin Eckler, so you lose that yardage total, that output that he brings to the table, both receiving the ball and rushing the ball, and any touchdowns, of course. But now you're kind of exposed to the fact of Jayden Daniels becomes your premier running back with, Brian Robinson being your secondary running back, it seems. And I'm not sure if that's really the game plan that they really want to hit the field with. And that's not to say that most people might not have looked at it already like that. But when the game comes down to it, you could tell that Brian Robinson is not the guy they're giving the ball to. For whatever reason, be it that he only got 3 yards a carry in this one, or be it the situation didn't give for it. In a game like this, if they go conservative, I feel like you need to put more time and effort into the rushing game beyond just your quarterback. And I get it. Brian Robinson ran the ball 21 times. You need to commit more. At the same time, you have to commend the team for continuing to get the ball to Terry McLaurin. This guy is money. You get him his targets, the team wins games. There's just another example here. 8 or more targets. He had 10 in this one. The team is now 6-0 when he sees that many targets or more. As far as the defense goes, they were able to get 3 sacks this week. Sam still was able to get an interception. You'd like to be able to say that they stopped them before they got that touchdown at the end, but at least they stopped the 2-point conversion. The team was able to hold on to get the victory. Because that would have been the difference in me coming on here and overall being in a good mood to me coming on here and being in a straight pissy mood if they would have lost. Because there would have been a list a mile long of why they lost. They're definitely going to have to try to find a way to correct, the things that they did wrong in this game and go into the Philly game looking to make no mistakes. This time we get the Eagles at home, meaningful football in December. Hopefully that means the fan base will show out for the game. Still physically a chance that they could win the division, even though, it's probably not going to happen. But it would be nice to be the first team to beat Philly in 3 months? At any rate, I'll come back and talk more about that before the game this week. But all in all, a team win here, a growing experience. Maybe they got a little lucky. I'll take luck over losses, okay? Any day of the week. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Who in here had this team at 9-5 at this stage of the season? If we're being honest, I guarantee you it's less than 20% of the fan base. No matter how they got it, y'all, get out there today and enjoy the rest of Victory Monday. Because it'll be back to the grindstone tomorrow. Y'all take it easy. Peace.